Chapter 160, Survive with a Broken Tail. Zhang Boyu asked the Xiao family to check on the Xiao family, which can be called daring to touch the tiger's whiskers, and the Xiao family is naturally extremely angry from top to bottom. What's more, above the government and the opposition, in the market, there are already many people wondering when Zhang Boyu will be unlucky. The Xiao family is a relative in power now, the mother of the Queen Mother. As the emperor, Shen Lang's attitude towards the Xiao family in the past few years has been seen by everyone, and it can already be called conniving. Although a household servant is not a small official in the court, what is it in front of the emperor? This Zhang Shilang doesn't seem to be a troubled person usually. Why did he get dizzy this time, and he actually came to raise the bar with the Xiao family? I'm afraid it's just for my daughter, right? Yes, I heard that in order to choose the Princess of Linzi, these wealthy families in Beijing are secretly holding back their strength. The bad reputation of the Zhang family girl, wasn't it spread by the people on the Xiao family's side at the beginning? Your arms can't twist your thighs, so why bother with this breath? It's a pity, it's a pity. No one thought that Zhang Boyu could curry favor from the Xiao family. Sure enough, there are few people who really stand up and support Zhang Boyu, and everyone is afraid that the gun will hit the first bird and be unlucky to themselves. After the fold was handed over, he didn't get an approval, but was detained by Shen Lang and left it behind. Xiao Yuan was so complacent that he threatened to make Zhang Boyu look good. But no one expected that only one day later, the original pressure was sent directly to the cabinet and handed over to several auxiliary ministers to discuss whether to approve the resumption. Although it is just such a small action, it has great meaning in the eyes of those who care. Each family couldn't help but secretly calculate. The ministers of the cabinet sat around the fold that was placed in the center of the table, and looked at each other silently, for fear that they had guessed the emperor's meaning wrongly. That afternoon, Xiao Yuan panicked. He is a foreign minister, and if he enters the palace to meet the Queen Mother at this time, he will inevitably show too many traces, and he is afraid that others will catch him, so he asks Xiao Shu, a junior, to ask the Queen Mother to say goodbye.
星号.
In the evening, Sining Palace was shrouded in a layer of twilight. The palace people who were waiting for dinner came out one after another. Xiao Shu, who was dressed in a gorgeous costume, showed a kind of vitality that was incompatible with Sining Palace under the dim light of the bleak sky, and stood quietly for a moment to wait for the call inside before entering from outside the palace gate to greet her. When Empress Dowager Xiao saw her, she laughed and said, "When I was as young as you, I also had such grace. You must have come for what has happened in the last few days?" Xiao Shu's heart was cold. She faintly felt that something was wrong. When did this noble aunt who used to dominate the sixth palace speak in such a dull tone, and how did she start to recall the past? It's my aunt's grace now, and Ah Shu can't reach it, let alone back then. Xiao Shu bowed and saluted, got up and leaned in as usual and affectionately. My aunt is also like a god, and my father's heart has been difficult to settle down in recent days. You know that he has always been a person who can't make up his mind, and he is worried about the beginning of spring, hot and cold, and the changes in the solar terms for no reason, so I specially asked Auntie to say hello to you, so please give you some advice. Xiao Shu's words have always been leaky, and very pleasing to people. If she listened to it usually, Empress Dowager Xiao would have laughed at this time, and pulled her in front of her to speak. But at the moment, he only stared at her. After a long time, she saw that the smile on Xiao Shu's face gradually couldn't hold back, and she said slowly, "Where did the mourning family catch up with you back then? You also said that it was your father who needed the mourning family's ideas and guidance, and it was my brother who didn't make it possible." As soon as these words came out, Xiao Shu leaned over and knelt in front of her, and her voice sounded a little frightened. "Auntie, why are you so serious?" Empress Dowager Xiao couldn't find a trace of a smile on her face, and even appeared a little fierce, gritted her teeth and said, My foolish brother really raised a good daughter. The mourning family only knows that you are smart, seek advantages and avoid disadvantages, and you are the only person in the capital who is worthy of sitting in the position of the Lord of the Six Palaces. You really live up to it. At home, you really have a good plan for your father. Xiao Shu raised her eyes and looked at her in amazement. Empress Dowager Xiao sneered, the discussion of harmony is very loud, and the Xiao family is a thorn in the flesh in the eyes of others, a live target. Your father can't carry it clearly, but you can't not know it. The more times like this, the more you can't act rashly. But what idea did you give your father? You actually used the Tongzhou incident to pour dirty water on Zhang Boyu's daughter. Xiao Shu still didn't seem to understand the Queen Mother's words, and said, Zhang Suiwai is Ah Shu's biggest opponent. If there is no her, the position of Princess Linza belongs to me. Is Ah Shu doing something wrong? Confused. Seeing that she hadn't understood at this time, Empress Dowager Xiao was so angry that she slapped her in the face. Smack! Xiao Shu was beaten and stumbled and sat on the ground. Empress Dowager Xiao pointed to her nose and scolded with hatred, I have taught you for so many years, but I didn't expect you to be born to my foolish brother and a stupid woman outside, and it is all in vain to look smart on weekdays, and all you have in your head at the critical moment is wax. You used Zhang Xuaning's matter to pour dirty water on Zhang Suiwai, which of course caused Zhang Suiwai to suffer, but you didn't expect that people would fight back. Not to mention that now the market and the court are talking about you, and they want to push you to go to Tatar for Liang to make peace. How can you choose you as a concubine if you can understand the current situation? There are many mouths in the world, and one person's mouthful of saliva is enough to drown him. Even if you don't choose Zhang Suiwai, there are also Chen Shuyi and Zhao Shuyi. Where can I get you? The palace maids retreated outside early, and the entire hall was cold. Xiao Shu's lowered eyes trembled slightly, and when she raised her head, she seemed to have just thought of these tricks, and the whole person seemed to lose her mind. After a while, she seemed to be panicked, knelt down in front of Empress Dowager Xiao, kowtowed, and said, It's Ah Shu who is so confused that she forgot that there is still this layer, but now the big mistake has been made. And, you have been in the palace for many years, and the Holy One is your closest relative, there must be a way, right? I'm so afraid that they will really send me to with my relatives. Tears fell as she spoke. Empress Dowager Xiao usually teaches her as a close relative, because she is not so greedy and pampered, and sometimes she is a little better to Xiao Shu than Shenzai as her own daughter. But at this moment, seeing that she was messed up, she was a little tired and disappointed. She said coldly, If you don't make this stupid move, or I'm afraid that the mourning family can still protect you. After all, my Xiao clan is powerful. If I send you to kiss, the emperor is afraid that he will also be like a thorn in his heart, and he must guard against the collusion between the Xiao clan and the Tatars to seek to usurp the throne. But it's better for you to hand the knife to the emperor, so that he has an excuse to weaken the Xiao clan first. Empress Dowager Xiao closed her eyes, looking at her like an abandoned child. She felt that it was a waste of time to look at her more, and only said, Your bad idea has tried out the emperor's meaning by mistake, and now there is a mess left to be cleaned up by the mourning family, and the matter of harmony is that the mourning family is also powerless. Go back by yourself, and you won't have to go to the palace often to say hello in the future. Xiao Shu didn't seem to believe that she was so ruthless. Looking at the aunt, she asked, Does the aunt want to watch Ah Shu go to the dangerous Tatar and kiss? Mrs. Xiao was expressionless and said unmoved, Zai is the flesh and blood of the mourning family, she can go, why can't you go? Xiao Shu lowered her head. Empress Dowager Xiao got up and didn't care about her, leaving only one sentence, The heavenly family has no father and son, you are too stupid, don't blame the mourning family for being too ruthless. After saying this, the figure of Empress Dowager Xiao had disappeared behind the painting screen. The twilight outside also fell completely, and the hall was dark. So whether it was the Empress Dowager Xiao who left, or the palace maid who walked in, I didn't see it. At the moment when the figure of the Empress Dowager Xiao disappeared and the darkness shrouded it, Xiao Shu's originally bright and brilliant beauty face, respectful, frightened, and sad, all faded as if a layer of color on the painting was dyed with water, leaving only a beautiful face with delicate facial features embedded in it. Like a dummy. There is even a kind of treachery. She got up unusually calmly, and walked out of the hall with the 5 fingerprints left by the slap of the Empress Dowager Xiao on her cheeks. The palace maids carried the palace lantern to send her out of the palace. Because he heard the anger of the Queen Mother in the palace, he didn't dare to look at her carefully, and after a glance, he buried his head. It was only halfway through that Xiao Shu's footsteps stopped. The palace maid was strange and looked back. But I saw Xiao Shu standing under a palace wall, raising her head and staring at a certain place above. There was a small gecko lying on the edge of the vermilion wall, which is not uncommon elsewhere, but the tail was shortened and looked bare, and it turned out to have a broken mark. The palace maid was taken aback. It must be that the eunuchs in the palace are not careful. How can there be this thing? She came up to chase the gecko away. The gecko was frightened and crawled quickly along the edge of the wall, and disappeared without a trace. Xiao Shu lowered her eyes, but her expression was faintly gloomy, and a sense of melancholy surged out of her heart. If someone had told her before, she would be forced step by step to the point where she is now struggling to survive. I am afraid that she will be this person talking nonsense and making people beat out of the stick. But now, the reality of the situation was so cruelly placed in front of her. The cold words of Empress Dowager Xiao in the Sinning Palace were still echoing in her mind, but they did not arouse half of her disappointment and sadness, let alone any shame. How could she not know the consequences of using the Tongzhou incident to smear Jiang Xuning? It is even more impossible not to know the current situation, not to mention Shenju, the king of Linzi. But anyone with a little vision in Beijing will not marry her at this time, causing countless troubles to his family. Jiang Xuning. Xiao Shu remained silent, took the palace lamp from the palace maid's hand, and only said, "Give it to me, I know the road in the palace. If I want to be alone, I can go out of the palace by myself." The palace maid didn't dare to say much, but she was happy and relaxed, so she hesitated for a moment and didn't object. But after the palace maid left, Xiao Shu's footsteps turned, and the direction she walked was not the Shenzhen gate in the northeast corner at all, but the Qianqing Palace in the center of the entire palace.